no one warned you that the quietest women in Tudor courts were the ones you should fear most. Their smiles hid movements that changed destinies, and their silence carried intentions no one dared name. Every gesture, every polite word, held more weight than any blade. Tonight, don't you will walk beside them and see how conflict grew loud only when no one spoke at all. So, before you feel comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Only if your heart truly wants to. If you do like it, leave a little comment letting me know what time it is, where you are. Now, dim the lights. Adjust the pillow to fit your head. Maybe turn on a fan to create a relaxing atmosphere. And let's begin this journey together tonight. If one were to stand inside the corridors of a Tudor palace, it would be easy to believe that calm faces meant calm lives. Courtiers moved with slow precision, their hands folded neatly, their eyes lowered just enough to signal respect. Nothing appeared chaotic on the surface, but beneath the polished courtyards and measured greetings, quiet tensions pulsed like a second heartbeat of the court. Women, especially, carried their conflicts under layers of silk and etiquette. They were forbidden from raising their voices, forbidden from showing displeasure, and forbidden from challenging another openly. Yet they lived in a world that demanded constant self-defense. Survival required confrontation. Only without the appearance of confrontation. Their lives were shaped by rules they did not write. Every gesture had consequences. A misplaced look could be interpreted as insolence. A delayed curtsy could be catalogued as rebellion. Men in the Tudor court fought with armies and proclamations. But women fought with silence, posture, and timing. The court claimed to value obedience, but it watched women more closely than soldiers. Silence became both their shield and their weapon. In this world, a woman could not step forward and accuse another of deceit, ambition, or betrayal. Doing so would stain her reputation faster than any misdeed she attempted to expose. The court rewarded calmness even when it was forced. Anger was a risk, jealousy was a flaw, and assertiveness was a near crime. Women learned to mask their thoughts behind gentle smiles. They spoke softly, not because they wished to, but because anything louder threatened their place at court. The quietest women survived longest. The palace itself seemed designed to contain conflict without ever acknowledging it. Narrow passages encouraged encounters that looked accidental, but were rarely so. Women crossed paths by intention, their steps measured, their expressions controlled. A noblewoman might glide past her rival with the faintest nod. Yet inside that gesture lived a full argument, superiority, warning, dismissal. Nothing needed to be said. Everything was understood. The palace thrived on these unspoken exchanges. Even routine daily life offered opportunities for silent warfare. At meals, women monitored where others were seated. Proximity to influential men meant influence itself. A woman positioned too far from the center lost visibility. A woman too close attracted suspicion. Every arrangement held significance. Even a simple walk through the garden could become symbolic: who walked in front, who lagged, who pretended indifference. Power was measured in inches, not proclamations. The court also demanded a particular performance, the appearance of harmony. Women learned to perfect the illusion. They complimented dresses they hated. They exchanged blessings with rivals they wished to see removed. They maintained serene expressions, even when their futures hinged on a single whisper passed in another room. A Tudor woman lived inside a script she did not believe, yet she was forced to recite her lines flawlessly. At times, silence carried more violence than a raised hand. A woman could destroy another simply by withholding approval at a crucial moment. Her refusal to speak could spark doubt, suspicion, or fear. In the Tudor world, what was not said mattered far more than what was spoken. Entire conflicts unfolded without anyone outside the court noticing. Even those inside sometimes failed to recognize the trap until it closed around them. This quiet system of confrontation required constant awareness. Women watched each other the way soldiers watched enemy lines. They studied glances, timing, and tone. A smile held for a moment too long became a warning. A greeting delivered with perfect politeness became a declaration of distance. Women who mastered these subtleties could rise far above their assigned status. Women who misread them fell quickly. In this environment, gentleness became deceptive. Soft voices hid calculations sharper than steel. A bowed head did not necessarily signal humility. It could mark the moment a woman recognized her rival's weakness. The court celebrated feminine grace. Unaware, unwilling to acknowledge that grace often cloaked hardened strategy. What appeared calm was rarely calm at all. Parents taught their daughters these lessons early. A young woman entering service at court learned within days that words were dangerous tools. She learned to store her frustrations behind a composed face. She learned to show admiration even when she felt resentment. She learned that silence protected her from accusations. Over time, silence did more than protect, silence empowered. Those who could not adapt suffered. Women who spoke too plainly were labeled troublesome. Women who confronted others directly were mocked for lacking dignity. Women who expressed jealousy risked everything. Many discovered too late that their downfall began not with a scandal, but with an expression someone else disliked. A single moment of visible emotion could erase months of careful restraint. The irony, of course, was that the court relied on these silent battles. Without them, its surface calm would fracture. The ability of women to restrain themselves allowed the palace to maintain its illusion of perfect order. Their quiet, controlled conflicts filled the spaces where open violence would have erupted in other societies. Silence held the palace together, but silence also carved away at those who lived within it. Through this system, women learned to project serenity while constantly preparing for unseen threats. The calmness others admired was not natural but practiced through necessity. Behind the lowered eyes and soft voices lived minds calculating every risk. The court believed women were peaceful. The truth was that they simply hid their conflicts deeper, shaping them into something the world would not condemn. In the end, many of these women failed not because they lacked intelligence, but because they underestimated how well others had mastered the same techniques. The quiet smile they dismissed as harmless sometimes carried the final warning before everything collapsed. Their downfall arrived without sound. The calm surface these women preserved was built on tensions no one wished to name. Beneath that appearance, something else was already shifting. And somewhere in those guarded halls, a gesture was waiting to reveal more than anyone expected. Women in the Tudor court lived within boundaries drawn long before they were born. Their world was built on limits, each one shaping their behavior, their reputation, and their survival. They were excluded from councils, barred from official debate, and kept at the edges of political life. Men believed this separation protected order, but it created something else entirely, a quieter, more intricate form of influence. Women learned to operate within the narrow spaces allowed to them, shaping decisions without appearing to touch them. The court underestimated how much could be achieved from the margins. Their influence began at home. A wife's words, spoken gently in private, often reached farther than arguments made in public chambers. Husbands who dismissed women from formal politics still carried their wives' opinions into the rooms where decisions were made. A woman who appeared obedient could guide her household with precision, redirecting the ambitions of men who believed they acted independently. This form of power was subtle, almost invisible, but it shaped the court more than anyone admitted. Mothers exerted an influence of their own. They were responsible for forming the next generation. Heirs, advisors, and future courtiers. Boys raised under their guidance carried traces of their mother's beliefs long after they stepped into positions of authority. A mother's silent judgments, her fears and her hopes became part of her children's worldview. In a court where loyalty meant everything, the emotional weight of a mother's approval or disapproval could shift destinies. These connections were never recorded in official histories, yet they touched every corner of Tudor life. Even kings were not immune. Monarchs relied on the company of women, not only for companionship, but for reassurance, comfort, and affirmation. A queen's expression at dinner could steady a king's temper or deepen his suspicions. A single comment, spoken softly while the court slept, could harden a monarch's resolve or soften it. Women understood this tension, the line between influence and danger. They walked it with care, aware that their power was necessary but never guaranteed. The court expected women to remain passive, yet paradoxically demanded that they uphold harmony throughout the palace. They were expected to soothe tempers, ease conflicts, and maintain appearances. This expectation created another form of power. Women became the interpreters of emotion in a world where men often ignored it. They recognized jealousy before it erupted, resentment before it grew destructive, and alliances before they solidified. They moved through the emotional architecture of the court the way soldiers moved through streets they knew by heart. Their observations shaped warnings, advice, and small comments that rippled outward. But there were risks. Influence obtained quietly could be lost loudly. A woman who made too many decisions risked appearing manipulative. A woman whose husband repeated her opinions too openly risked accusations of overreach. The court punished ambition in women with far more enthusiasm than in men. Rumors grew quickly around women who seemed to reach beyond their designated place. Even a hint of excessive influence could destroy reputations, marriages, and futures. The most dangerous position a woman could hold was to be seen guiding a man too clearly. Because of this, women refined their strategies. Some learned to shape opinions by posing questions instead of making statements. Others used their silence to direct conversations, allowing men to believe ideas were their own. Some were influenced by withholding agreement until it mattered most. These methods created a web of suggestions and impressions that swirled beneath visible politics. Those who mastered this subtlety became indispensable, even to those who pretended not to depend on them. Servants observed these patterns as well. Maids, governesses, and attendants saw more than nobles realized. They heard the quieter conversations. I noticed the shifts in tone and carried messages between rooms. Women learned to use these lower voices in the hierarchy, carefully, cautiously, to reinforce their influence. A rumor whispered by a maid could create pressure without ever being traced back to its origin. A misplaced comment overheard by the right person could serve as a warning or encouragement. The boundaries women lived under forced them to become experts in navigating every layer of the household. Their indirect power made them both respected and feared. Respect came from the stability they created. Fear came from the unpredictability of their reach. Men could not always identify the source of sudden changes in mood, alliances, or decisions. What seemed like a coincidence often traced back to a quiet conversation held hours earlier in a chamber lit by a single candle. Women protected their families, advanced their interests, and defended their positions through these hidden forms of influence. Yet the influence of this kind came with a cost. Women carried the burden of responsibility without the protection of authority. If something went wrong, they were blamed swiftly and harshly. Their successes were attributed to chance. Their failures were attributed to character. Living in the shadows of politics meant they could never claim their victories openly. Everything they achieved had to appear effortless, accidental, or incidental. Anything else invited scrutiny. Even so, the court could not function without them. Their presence stabilized unpredictable men and softened decisions that might otherwise lead to chaos. Their careful guidance prevented conflicts from tearing households apart. Their emotional intelligence acted as an invisible infrastructure beneath the outward power structures. The court relied on them, but rarely admitted it. Over time, women understood that their position was both a weapon and a vulnerability. Their influence was real, but it could turn against them without warning. Each decision they shaped created both opportunity and peril. They lived with constant awareness that their power depended on invisibility, and invisibility depended on perfect restraint. Their world demanded intelligence without acknowledgement, loyalty without recognition, and strategy without defense. Their quiet influence shaped more than anyone dared to say. Yet it was always one misstep away from danger. Beneath the surface, something else was already shifting into place. And in the space between what was spoken and unspoken, another form of power waited to be seen. Jealousy moved quietly through the Tudor court, carried not by accusations, but by glances that lasted a moment too long. Women learned early that open displeasure was unacceptable. To reveal resentment was to reveal weakness, and weakness invited scrutiny. Instead, they buried their emotions beneath layers of ritual. Every greeting, every bow, every polite exchange masked something else: fear, rivalry, suspicion. Etiquette was not merely a social expectation. It became the structure that concealed tensions no one dared to name. When two women crossed paths in a corridor, the silence between them spoke more clearly than any argument. One might lower her eyes just slightly, not out of humility, but to avoid giving away the turbulence beneath. The other might hold her chin a fraction higher, signaling confidence she did not feel. These small gestures formed a language understood only by those who lived within the palace walls. Jealousy rarely appeared in words. It hid instead in pauses, in stiffened fingers, in a smile that disappeared too quickly. At court gatherings, this hidden language became even more intricate. Women exchanged blessings they did not mean, spoke of health and fortune while imagining the opposite. A compliment delivered too sweetly could be a warning. A delayed response could be a calculated insult. They learned to read each other with ruthless precision, noticing the tremor in a voice, the hesitation before a curtsy, the shift in a stance. Etiquette did not smooth over tensions, it sharpened them. Each movement became an opportunity to assert superiority or mask insecurity. Even religious ceremonies served as battlegrounds for these silent hostilities. In the chapel, where devotion was supposed to silence earthly concerns, women watched each other with steady, expressionless eyes. A bowed head could signal reverence or conceal envy. A whispered prayer might carry genuine hope or the desire for another's downfall. They knelt in the same rows, shared the same rituals, and hid their resentments beneath the solemnity of faith. The church offered a convenient setting to disguise inner conflict. The sacred atmosphere made suspicion appear less likely, even as it thrived. Festivals and celebrations only deepened these contradictions. A woman offering congratulations for another's good fortune might speak with perfect grace, though her thoughts churned with resentment. A rival's success, advancement, favor, or a place nearer the throne threatened more than pride. It jeopardized security, position, and future alliances. Yet, to acknowledge jealousy openly was to risk being labeled unstable or untrustworthy. Women mastered the art of smiling through clenched teeth, hiding disappointment beneath layers of silk and ceremony. Servants witnessed these exchanges more closely than nobles realized. They carried trays through rooms filled with stiff courtesies, observing the strained elegance of women who disliked one another. A maid could sense when a blessing was insincere or when a greeting was delivered with calculated softness. These silent observations often became fuel for whispered rumors. Yet even these rumors reflected the court's preference for indirect expression. Nothing was addressed directly, not even in gossip. Everything remained coded. When jealousy became too heavy to hide, women found ways to express it without breaking the rules. Some withdrew from social gatherings, feigning illness or fatigue. Others altered their clothing, choosing colors or fabrics that spoke for them without speaking aloud. A dress slightly richer than usual might signal defiance. A simpler gown might convey wounded pride. The court viewed clothing as decoration. Women used it as communication. Ritual dictated modesty. But jealousy twisted modesty into symbolism. The most dangerous expressions of jealousy occurred at formal meals. Seated in rows with careful hierarchy, women measured each other's proximity to power. A rival placed closer to influential men sparked a quiet storm of resentment. Yet the ritual prevented any visible reaction. They sipped wine, cut their food, and exchanged polite remarks. The table setting forced them into proximity, even as they hid their animosities. It was a slow, deliberate performance. Every gesture flattened into civility. Gift-giving became another channel for concealed envy. A present delivered at the right moment could appear generous while reinforcing a sense of superiority. Conversely, receiving a poorly timed gift might sting like an insult. Women examined every detail: the wrapping, the value, the material, the symbolism. To refuse a gift was forbidden. To accept one without revealing its emotional impact was expected. Thus, jealousy lived in the space between gratitude and grievance, wrapped neatly in protocol. Over time, many women became experts at suppressing their reactions. They learned to steal their expressions, soften their voices, and nod in agreement even when confronted with painful reminders of their own vulnerabilities. The rituals they performed daily were supposed to maintain order, but they often served to protect the fragile balance between cooperation and rivalry. Etiquette allowed them to coexist while hiding the emotional costs of doing so. Yet jealousy could not be erased, only redirected. Women internalized their frustrations until they found socially acceptable ways to release them. A rumor whispered to a confidant, a cold glance sent across a hall, a blessing delivered with too much sweetness. These small acts allowed them to release tension without risking open conflict. The court admired their composure, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge how much discipline it required. Ritual thus became both shelter and prison. It protected women from accusations of impropriety while trapping them in a constant performance. Their outward calm concealed storms that never found full expression. The palace remained orderly, not because its inhabitants lacked emotion, but because they had mastered the art of hiding it behind ritual. Jealousy survived in this environment precisely because it was never confronted directly. It lived quietly, adapting to every gesture the court demanded. The result was a world where resentment passed unnoticed by many yet shaped countless decisions. Women carried their jealousy like a small stone hidden in the folds of their gowns. Unseen, but never forgotten. Some used it to push themselves into better positions. Others allowed it to wear them down, eroding confidence and trust. But all of them learned to conceal it. For the court punished emotion more severely than ambition. Their careful rituals preserved the illusion of harmony, even as unspoken tensions gathered beneath the surface. Nothing in the room stayed still, though no one acknowledged the shift. Somewhere behind a lowered gaze, another intention was waiting to emerge. Power moved quietly behind the throne, carried not by proclamations, but by the silent presence of women who understood how influence truly worked. Queens and noblewomen knew that open persuasion was a dangerous path. A single moment of visible ambition could stain them permanently. Instead, they shaped the political landscape through conversations held in private chambers, brief exchanges in candlelit corridors, and the subtle pressure of their absence or approval. Their influence was rarely acknowledged publicly, yet it echoed through every decision the king made. The court expected them to speak softly, if at all. A woman who voiced her thoughts too directly risked being labeled troublesome, or worse, a manipulator. The fear of being dismissed as overly talkative pressed them into a narrow form of expression. They learned to sidestep this danger by withholding their words until the moment they mattered most. Silence became a calculated tool, one that magnified whatever they chose to say afterward. A single sentence delivered at the right time carried more force than an hour of pleading. Behind closed doors, these women navigated an environment shaped by uncertainty. The king's mood shifted with political pressures, religious disputes, and personal anxieties. His advisors circled him constantly, seeking advantage. Women moved through this storm not with grand statements, but with deliberate restraint. They observed more than they revealed. When they did speak, it was usually with measured calm, as if offering reflections rather than directives. This careful performance kept their influence hidden while ensuring it remained potent. Noble women used their domestic positions to shape the loyalties of those around them. A well-timed gesture of kindness toward a servant could secure a steady stream of information. A quiet conversation with a visiting ambassador could plant a thought he believed was his own. These interactions appeared harmless to outside observers, yet each one nudged the balance of power slightly, redirecting relationships, altering perceptions, and strengthening the woman's hold on her household. Influence built this way could withstand storms that the public authority could not. Queens held the most delicate position of all. Their proximity to the king gave them unparalleled access, but it also placed them under constant scrutiny. Every word they spoke was weighed by courtiers searching for signs of favoritism or instability. A queen who pressed too firmly on political matters risked being accused of overstepping her role, a charge that could lead to isolation or worse. To remain effective, she had to maintain calm even when the stakes were painfully high. Her silence, carefully controlled, often signaled more than any visible action. Even ordinary conversations between women at court contained layers of purpose. A comment about a recent decision might disguise a warning. A shared observation could guide another woman's behavior without acknowledging any intention behind it. These exchanges wove a web of influence that stretched across the palace, connecting women who appeared to be simply engaging in polite discussion. Their restraint created a surface that appeared peaceful, though constant negotiation occurred beneath it. Power shifted gradually in this environment. A noble woman who understood how to withdraw at the right moment gained more authority than one who constantly sought attention. A quiet refusal to participate in a particular gathering could unsettle rivals. Silence, in these cases, acted as a barrier that others could not penetrate. It became a way of reminding the court that influence did not always announce itself. Sometimes it watched, waited, and pressed only when necessary. This quiet race for influence left little room for error. A misplaced word, a moment of visible frustration, or an expression interpreted incorrectly could undo months of careful positioning. Women learned to steady their faces, soften their tones, and hold back reactions. Their survival depended on discipline as much as intelligence. Those who thrived understood that stillness was not weakness. It was a strategy. Even so, the weight of constant restraint changed them. Their identities became intertwined with their performances. They learned to anticipate others' emotions before acknowledging their own. Every pause, every breath, became a potential signal. The palace admired their composure while ignoring the cost of maintaining it. They lived inside a world where quiet decisions carried heavy consequences and where every controlled gesture shaped the path ahead. Over time, these silent contests for influence created an undercurrent that touched every corner of court life. Decisions attributed to men often bore the faint imprint of women who had guided them from the shadows. The court pretended not to see this, preferring the illusion that power moved through official channels. But those who watched carefully understood that the real movement often came from elsewhere. Their restraint shaped the palace more deeply than anyone admitted, leaving traces in choices that seemed effortless. Nothing about their silence was accidental, even when it appeared natural. Within that quiet exchange of glances, another force was preparing to shift the balance again. Power in the Tudor court often moved without noise. carried by women who understood that influence did not need volume to be effective. They learned early that sound could betray them. But silence, if handled carefully, could reshape the lives of those around them. A single glance, directed at the right moment, could shift a servant's standing. A whispered remark offered in a quiet hallway could cast doubt on a rival's loyalty. None of these actions appeared drastic from the outside, yet they altered the structure of the court with undeniable force. Servants felt this power most keenly. A lady of status might look at a maid with a calm expression that did not match the tension in her eyes. The maid, sensing danger, would lower her head, unsure whether she was being dismissed, warned, or merely observed. In a place where reputation determined survival, this uncertainty was enough to change everything. Servants could be transferred, questioned, or quietly removed from familiar rooms without explanation. Their fortunes depended not on their work alone, but on the moods of the women they served. A well-timed remark could cause even more disruption. Women of influence understood that words did not need to be loud or lengthy to reshape opinions. A soft comment offered to the right nobleman, spoken as though in passing, could lead him to question the loyalty or competence of someone he had never doubted before. The comment might have been vague, something as small as, "She seems distracted lately," or "I do not know if she understands her duties." These suggestions travelled quickly, carried by minds eager to interpret and act. Before long, the accused individual found themselves facing consequences no one openly described. The court relied heavily on rumours to interpret its own shifting atmosphere. Women recognized this and used rumours as tools with precision. A rumour did not implicate its creator, yet it shaped the decisions of those who encountered it. Rumours filled the gaps left by silence, weaving stories that did not need confirmation to be believed. The more uncertain a rumour's origin, the more dangerous it becomes. Women understood this structure instinctively and deployed it with care, directing suspicion without lifting a hand. These tactics did not merely target servants, they could reach noblewomen as well. A queen's lady-in-waiting, known for her proximity to the throne, could lose her position after a subtle campaign against her. A whispered suggestion that she had grown overly confident, or that the queen no longer favoured her, could spread through the palace unnoticed by the woman herself. By the time she sensed danger, her rivals had already secured new alliances, and her own position had begun to crumble. No accusation had been spoken, no confrontation had taken place, yet she found herself standing on ground that felt suddenly unstable. The women who mastered these methods moved through the palace with deliberate calm. They seldom appeared agitated. They never displayed frustration openly. Instead, they cultivated an aura of composed certainty that made others wary of crossing them. Their silence created space for observers to interpret intentions that did not need to be expressed. The mystery surrounding them became a form of deterrence. No one wished to provoke someone who could alter the course of events without raising her voice. Even the king, for all his authority, was not untouched by this quiet network of influence. A single suggestion from a woman he trusted could plant doubt in his mind about a servant, a courtier, or even another noblewoman. The woman offering the suggestion did not need to insist or explain. She simply needed to express mild concern, perhaps accompanied by a controlled expression that hinted at something unspoken. The king, sensitive to signs of unrest, often acted quickly to prevent imagined threats. In this way, women shaped outcomes without ever appearing to drive them. These subtle maneuvers created a landscape where disappearance itself became a kind of language. When someone at court suddenly lost favour, others noted the shift even if they pretended not to. They saw who maintained her composure, who received new duties, and who avoided certain corridors. The palace rarely recorded these changes in its written accounts, but those who lived within its walls understood exactly what had happened. A woman had acted, not with confrontation, but with precision. This silent approach to power made the court appear orderly from the outside. Outsiders saw refined gestures, polite exchanges, and well-practiced rituals. They did not see the undercurrents that shaped decisions and redistributed influence. To them, the palace seemed controlled and dignified. Those living within it knew that dignity often hid something else, the quiet replacement of one life with another, the steady removal of someone who had crossed an invisible line. Over time, this method of exerting power became expected. It was woven into the daily fabric of court life. Accepted not because it was fair, but because it functioned without disrupting ceremony. Women operated within these unspoken rules because they understood that any other method would expose them to danger. Their restraint protected them, but it also made their strategies more precise and far more difficult to detect. In such a world, disappearance was not always physical. Sometimes it meant loss of influence, relocation to a lesser room, or exclusion from certain gatherings. Women weaponized these outcomes with intention. They could remove a rival without ever touching her destiny directly. The court accepted these quiet adjustments, pretending they were natural shifts rather than deliberate actions. Power, in this environment, did not require confrontation. It required steadiness, timing, and an understanding of how fear shaped behavior. The surface remained controlled even when its currents pushed lives in unexpected directions. Nothing about these movements was accidental, though few cared to see the intent behind them. Inside that measured silence, another plan was already waiting to unfold. Rumours travelled through the Tudor court with a speed that no official message could match. They slipped through doorways, drifted along corridors, and settled into the minds of those who listened without ever revealing where they began. Women understood this better than anyone. They recognized that a rumor required no proof and carried no signature. Yet it shaped decisions with remarkable force. In a palace where appearances held greater weight than truth, rumors became an essential instrument for maintaining control. A single whispered comment could alter the course of a woman's life. A noblewoman might hear that someone questioned her loyalty, though no one could name the source. A maid might find her duties reduced after a suggestion that she had grown inattentive. No one confronted them openly. Instead, the rumor carved out a quiet space where doubt replaced certainty. Those who heard it adjusted their behavior, unsure whether the accusation was real or merely convenient. The absence of clarity made the rumor even stronger. Women used this ambiguity with precision. They did not need to speak loudly or repeat themselves. A quiet observation placed in the right ear. She seems troubled. Or, I wonder if she can be trusted, travelled far beyond its original audience. Listeners repeated it not because they believed it, but because repeating it felt safe. Passing along uncertainty allowed them to appear informed without taking responsibility for the claim. The rumor spread, gathering new interpretations with each retelling. The palace, with its constant movement and layered hierarchy, made the perfect environment for this kind of influence. Servants carried trays between rooms and absorbed fragments of conversation. Courtiers lingered near doorways, listening for hints of unrest. Even guards overheard remarks that drifted through open windows. None of them intended to become carriers, yet all contributed to the rumor's expansion. Women who understood this structure learned to plant information in places where it would be repeated without question. Those who became targets of these rumors rarely knew how to respond. Denying a rumor only strengthened it, suggesting that the accused had something to hide. Ignoring it risked appearing indifferent or arrogant. The safest option, silence, was also the most painful, forcing them to watch their reputation erode without a clear way to defend themselves. Women who lost standing this way often discovered that their allies had already withdrawn by the time they recognized the threat. Rumors did not always cause immediate damage. Sometimes they worked slowly, settling into the background until circumstances made them relevant. A woman could live peacefully for months before a past rumor resurfaced with new significance. When an opportunity or crisis emerged, the rumor gained fresh life, reshaping how others evaluated her character. These delayed consequences made rumors especially dangerous. They never truly disappeared, they merely waited. In many cases, rumors acted as warnings. Women listened carefully to whispers about failing fortunes, shifting alliances, or dangerous ambitions. These reports allowed them to adjust their own strategies before trouble reached them. They interpreted the palace's mood through these fragments. Even if the information was inaccurate, it revealed how others were thinking. Rumors, therefore, served as both threat and guidance, informing decisions without demanding trust. Those who mastered the use of rumors understood that the most effective claims were vague. Specific accusations could be disproven. General unease could not. A suggestion that someone seemed different, looked anxious, or acted strangely spread easily because it required no further explanation. These statements attached themselves to everyday observations, feeding on moments that might otherwise have passed unnoticed. The rumor's strength came from its flexibility. It adapted to whatever details listeners provided. In the Tudor court, a rumor could remove someone from a position of influence without anyone needing to confront her directly. A woman who became the subject of persistent whispers found invitations reduced, conversations shortened, and opportunities withheld. She might not understand why others treated her differently. The court did not explain such shifts. It preferred ambiguity. The quiet disappearance of influence made the palace seem orderly, even when its undercurrents were ruthless. Women used rumors not only to harm rivals, but also to protect themselves. A whispered warning about a dangerous courtier could distance them from a potential threat. A strategically placed remark about shifting loyalties could keep others cautious. Rumors filled the gaps left by formal communication, allowing women to navigate a world where direct statements were often punished. When used carefully, they offered safety in a place where safety was rare. Yet the most unsettling aspect of rumors was their anonymity. No one knew who started them. They emerged without origin, shaped by each retelling, and dissolved before anyone could trace their path. Women feared this invisibility, even as they relied on it. A rumor that benefited one woman today could destroy her tomorrow. Its lack of structure made it impossible to control fully. Those who used rumors as weapons understood that they were always vulnerable to the same tactics. Despite this danger, rumors endured because they suited the palace's need for restraint. They allowed conflict to exist without open confrontation and permitted ambition to operate without being acknowledged. They became the silent currency of the court, exchanged freely by those who understood. That influence grew stronger when it was hidden. Their quiet circulation shaped decisions far more than anyone dared admit, leaving marks that few recognized at first. Nothing about these movements declared itself openly, yet everything shifted around them. In that muted drift of voices, another quiet intention was already forming. Visibility in the Tudor court carried a weight that few outside its walls understood. To stand beside the king, even briefly, was to make a statement that did not need words. Women recognized this immediately. Their presence, where they walked, who they accompanied, and how long they remained in a room became a form of communication. A woman appearing at the king's side signaled strength, favor, or rising influence. Another woman watching from a distance measured every detail, aware that such moments shifted the balance of the court. Clothing intensified this silent competition. A gown crafted from richer fabric, a sleeve cut in a more fashionable design, or a headdress arranged with flawless precision did more than express taste. It asserted status. Women understood that luxury, when displayed carefully, sent a sharp message to anyone who hoped to challenge them. A dress was not just a decoration. It was armor. It announced to others that its wearer possessed resources, connections, and confidence. For those who lacked these qualities, the message stung. These garments shaped perceptions long before a single word was spoken. When a woman entered a hall wearing colours associated with the queen, observers took note. When she chose a palette subtly different but equally striking, speculation followed. Every detail, the cut of the neckline, the richness of embroidery, the way jewels caught the candlelight, revealed something about her ambitions. Women studied each other's choices with the precision of scholars, reading meanings in the smallest variations. The act of walking into a room became a form of strategy. A woman who entered slightly ahead of another appeared to lead. A woman who walked behind seemed subordinate. These distinctions were not casual. They reflected the underlying contest for recognition. A contest that unfolded across the polished floors and narrow corridors of the palace. No one needed to speak for conflict to emerge. The arrangement of bodies said enough. In public events, competition grew sharper. Feasts, dance, and diplomatic receptions placed women in full view of the court. Their dresses shimmered beneath candlelight, each one crafted to command attention while maintaining an air of propriety. A woman who dressed too plainly risked fading into the background. A woman who dressed too boldly risked accusations of vanity. Navigating this balance required skill. Many succeeded. Others failed in ways that lingered in whispered conversations long after the event ended. Even the queen could not ignore these visual battles. Her authority depended on maintaining an image of dignity and superiority. When a noble woman appeared wearing a gown that rivaled her own in grandeur, the challenge was unmistakable. It might have been subtle, disguised as admiration or coincidence, but the intention reached everyone watching. The queen's silence in such moments carried meaning. Whether she smiled, looked away, or continued speaking as though nothing had occurred, observers interpreted each reaction with care. For women, lower in rank, clothing offered one of the few avenues to assert themselves. A newly married noblewoman might wear a gown gifted by her family to signal their continuing support. A widow might choose darker tones to evoke sympathy or distance. A lady-in-waiting might select colours that echoed those worn by the queen, hoping to appear more closely aligned with her. These choices served as quiet declarations of identity and loyalty. Presence itself could escalate tensions. When two women approached the king at the same time, each attempted to maintain composure while asserting priority. A slight adjustment of posture, a step timed perfectly between beats of music, or a moment of eye contact could tilt the encounter one way or another. Courtiers noticed these details instinctively, aware that influence expressed through gestures often proved more decisive than spoken appeals. Observers pretended not to watch, but they watched constantly. They studied who stood nearest the king during ceremonies, who positioned herself near ambassadors, and who withdrew at key moments. Each movement suggested alignment, ambition, or caution. In this environment, even absence carried weight. A woman missing from a gathering prompted speculation. Was she avoiding someone? Had she lost favour? Or was she preparing a different move? The palace encouraged these silent contests by rewarding those who managed them well. A woman who displayed elegance without arrogance, confidence without overt assertion, earned admiration. One who misjudged her choices found herself navigating whispers that questioned her judgment or character. The line between sophistication and provocation was thin, shifting constantly with the court's moods. The strongest women mastered the art of appearing effortless. They selected garments that drew attention without seeming intentional. They moved with controlled precision, acknowledging rivals with slight nods that revealed nothing. Their presence spoke for them, shaping how others perceived them long before they entered formal conversation. These women left deeper impressions than many who spoke loudly or petitioned directly for power. Over time, the court became a landscape shaped by colour, fabric, and carefully measured movements. Conflicts unfolded across embroidered sleeves and jewelled bodices, announced through entrances and silences rather than raised voices. The court's elegance concealed these tensions. allowing outsiders to admire beauty while missing the battles fought quietly beneath it. Their refined appearances carried meanings that outlasted the moment, reshaping perceptions long after the gatherings ended. Nothing unfolded on those polished floors without purpose, however calm it seemed. Behind one poised step, another shift in allegiance waited to reveal itself. Religious devotion offered Tudor women a shield that few questioned. The chapel stood as a place of solemnity, where motives appeared pure and ambitions invisible. Many noble women recognized the advantage this provided. When jealousy grew too sharp to hide in conversational ritual, they redirected it into displays of faith. Their increased presence at church seemed, on the surface, a gesture of humility. But beneath the polished expressions and bowed heads lay intentions shaped not by reverence, but by rivalry. Daily visits to the chapel became a quiet stage for these performances. A woman who sought to elevate herself might attend services more often, choosing seats that placed her in clear view of others. She knelt longer than required, held her prayer book with practiced stillness, and folded her hands in a posture that suggested unwavering devotion. Observers noted her discipline and whispered about her purity. Her rivals, seeing the admiration she received, felt the pressure immediately. Piety transformed into a form of competition. Though no one admitted it, these displays also created subtle contrasts. A woman who appeared less frequently at religious gatherings found herself compared to those who attended faithfully. Courtiers, eager to interpret the shifting values of the palace, assumed the absent woman lacked conviction. They questioned her loyalty, her stability, and her inner discipline. She might have been equally devout, but without the public performance, her sincerity seemed weaker. In this way, devotion became an indirect attack, disguised as moral superiority. Women who mastered this form of influence used symbolic gestures with precision. A lowered gaze suggested humility. A lengthy prayer implied a troubled conscience turned toward virtue. These appearances did not require explanation. They carried their own narrative, one that observers filled with assumptions. The quieter the ritual, the louder the message. Those who watched believed they were witnessing genuine integrity, unaware that the performance had been constructed to shift perceptions. Even confessions, though private in principle, became tools of strategy. A woman might hint to a priest about her concern for another's soul, her voice trembling with practiced sincerity. The priest, unable to repeat the confession, nonetheless altered his behavior in ways others noticed. When he offered guidance to a rival in public, the act appeared to validate the first woman's unspoken worries. Through this chain of subtle impressions, religious authority reinforced jealousy without ever acknowledging it. The chapel's atmosphere amplified these manipulations. Candlelight softened expressions, making false sorrow appear more convincing. The sound of hymns masked the tension between women who knelt side by side but refused to look at each other. The scent of incense created a sense of purity that overshadowed the calculations underneath. In such an environment, jealousy moved unnoticed, shaping alliances even as the congregation prayed. Women also used charitable acts to strengthen their positions. Donations to the poor, gifts to the church, or support for religious festivals appeared generous. Yet each act carried an unspoken message. The woman who gave possessed virtue beyond question. This subtle elevation forced others to compete or risk falling behind in the moral hierarchy. A woman who lacked resources could not match these offerings and thus appeared less dedicated. Jealousy, disguised as charity, punished those who could not participate fully. At times, devotion became a weapon used to isolate others. If a woman wished to diminish a rival, she might speak softly about the importance of purity, directing her words toward those most likely to gossip. Her remarks, though general, invited comparison. Listeners began to question who in the court truly lived with moral discipline. The rival, unknowingly placed under scrutiny, I found her every action interpreted through this new lens. A smile held too long. A conversation with the wrong person. Or a bit of laughter at an inappropriate moment suddenly seemed suspicious. Women who relied on piety in this way understood that nothing appeared more unassailable than virtue. Accusing someone of hypocrisy required evidence. Displaying personal devotion required none. The court, eager to believe in clear distinctions between righteousness and failing, fell easily into the trap. Ambition hidden behind prayer looked safe, respectable, even admirable. Few questioned the motives driving it. The most successful practitioners of this strategy maintained a careful balance. Their devotion could not appear exaggerated, or it risked attracting ridicule. Their gestures needed to seem spontaneous rather than rehearsed. They lived in a state of constant calibration, adjusting their displays of faith according to the court's shifting expectations. Their mastery of these subtleties allowed them to build reputations stronger than any spoken defense. Yet beneath the surface, the weight of this performance pressed heavily. Women forced to hide jealousy beneath rituals often found themselves unable to distinguish their genuine beliefs from the roles they played. Devotion became both armor and imprisonment, protecting them while limiting them. Their piety, celebrated publicly, masked a private struggle to maintain control in a world that punished emotional honesty. In the end, religious devotion became a convenient shelter for rivalry. It concealed jealousy so effectively that even those who practiced it sometimes forgot its true purpose. The court admired displays of purity while ignoring the conflicts woven into them. Faith, meant to elevate the spirit, became a stage for ambition. Their gestures of devotion reshaped reputations long before words could intervene, altering the court with movements that seemed harmless. Nothing about these rituals was as simple as it appeared, however serene they looked. Beneath one bowed head, another intention gathered strength. A glance carried more weight in the Tudor court than many weapons forged in iron. Women learned to communicate with their eyes long before they trusted their voices. A single look delivered across a candlelit hall could unsettle a rival more effectively than any raised accusation. Reputation was fragile, and fear of losing it hovered constantly above those who lived within the palace walls. Women understood that damaging someone's sense of security required no physical confrontation, only the suggestion that their standing might be threatened. Banquets served as the primary stage for these silent exchanges. Long tables stretched across the room, lined with guests whose expressions shifted between politeness and calculation. Servants moved quickly with dishes that filled the air with the scent of roasted meat, warm bread, and spiced wine. Beneath the noise of conversation, glances passed between women like messages written in an invisible language. A raised eyebrow hinted at disapproval. A slightly narrowed gaze signaled suspicion. These signals traveled quietly, yet struck deeply. A woman who sensed herself being watched often felt pressure immediately. She adjusted her posture, smoothed her sleeves, or directed her attention towards safer company. The discomfort that rippled through her movements revealed more than she intended. Observers noted this reaction, interpreting it as guilt, insecurity, or ambition. No one needed to explain the shift. The court recognized fear instinctively. Women who mastered the art of projecting calm gained advantages that had nothing to do with beauty or wealth. The banquet environment intensified these interactions. Music filled the background, creating a rhythm that concealed tension. Torches flickered against stone walls, casting shadows that exaggerated facial expressions. Every movement, a hand lifting a goblet, a head turning toward the king, a smile held for a moment too long, carried meaning. A woman seated near the center of the table received more attention than one at the edge, and she knew it. She monitored her rivals carefully, aware that a single glance could suggest overconfidence, envy, or subtle challenge. Some women deployed their gaze with precision. They allowed their eyes to rest on another woman just long enough to imply judgment. The target, recognizing the intention, responded with a carefully controlled expression. A polite smile might mask frustration. A slight bow of the head could convey resignation. The entire exchange unfolded in seconds, unnoticed by men who focused on entertaining guests. Yet for the women involved, the moment reshaped the evening's balance of power. Jealousy, rivalry, and suspicion festered beneath these silent interactions. Women understood that their survival depended not only on who they were, but on how they appeared. They could not confront rivals directly without risking punishment, nor could they ignore challenges without appearing weak. Their eyes became their most flexible tool. They used them to warn, provoke, reassure, and intimidate. The energy exchanged through these glances created a battlefield disguised as a celebration. Some of the most decisive conflicts occurred during the seating arrangements. To be placed close to the king signaled favor. To be moved farther away hinted at diminished importance. Women studied the table carefully, noting who had gained a better seat and who had lost one. When a rival approached a place of honor, she often felt the weight of numerous eyes measuring her worth. A woman already seated might glance at her with a calm so sharp it felt like a blade. That look told her she was stepping into contested territory. The consequences of these exchanges were indirect but powerful. A woman who faltered under scrutiny might withdraw from future gatherings. She might avoid approaching the king or cease participating in conversations that once offered opportunities. Her rivals interpreted this retreat as confirmation of weakness. Once she appeared vulnerable, others shifted their attention elsewhere, leaving her isolated. All of this occurred without a single word of confrontation. At times, a woman who excelled at these silent confrontations gained influence far beyond her official position. The court grew wary of crossing her. Servants noticed how easily she unsettled others. Noblemen recognized her ability to command attention without speaking. The king himself might sense her presence more keenly, though he might not understand why. Women with this talent created their own form of authority, rooted in perception rather than decree. Despite their subtlety, these exchanges carried emotional cost. Maintaining composure under intense scrutiny drained women of energy. A single night of feasting could feel like lasting through a battle, with the added expectation that every movement appears effortless. They left the hall exhausted, replaying each glance, each reaction, assessing what had shifted and what might be required next. The palace admired their grace while ignoring the strain that produced it. In the end, these silent confrontations shaped the court more deeply than any formal dispute. The absence of open conflict made them seem harmless, but their effects lingered. Women learned to anticipate threats before they formed, avoiding danger by reading signals invisible to most. Their eyes became instruments of both defense and attack, carving pathways through a world where survival depended on awareness. Their quiet rivalry altered the atmosphere even when voices remained steady, pushing boundaries without drawing notice. Nothing in those grand halls stayed untouched by a single calculated glance. Across the room, another intention waited for its moment to strike. Alliances between Tudor women formed quietly, built not from public declarations, but from gestures that seemed harmless to those who did not understand their meaning. Noble women recognized that power rarely flowed in straight lines. It moved through conversations, whispered in doorways, shared glances across crowded halls, and invitations extended with careful precision. Allying required no ceremony. It began when two women realized their interests intersected, and that cooperation offered protection neither could secure alone. A tea invitation, given at the right moment, carried far greater weight than its delicate appearance suggested. When one woman invited another into her private chambers, it signaled more than courtesy. It represented an opening, an opportunity for exchange, for negotiation, for subtle promises. The tone of the invitation determined its purpose. Spoken gently, it suggested friendship. Spoken too softly, It hinted at coercion. Those who received such invitations knew better than to accept without considering the consequences. Inside these small gatherings, conversation unfolded slowly. Women never stated their intentions directly. They spoke of family matters, of church visits, of dresses being tailored. Beneath these ordinary topics, something else circulated, a shared recognition that alliances shaped survival. A single remark about shifting loyalties, delivered with a calm voice and steady eyes, could bind two women together in mutual caution. Another woman, unaware she was being discussed. I might find her position weakening before she recognized the threat. These alliances rarely remained constant. They shifted with marriages, births, scandals, and opportunities. A woman might align herself with someone she disliked if their goals temporarily matched. She might sever ties without warning if the alliance threatened her reputation. Loyalty in such arrangements was never sentimental. It was strategic. Women understood that attachment created vulnerability, so they gave just enough trust to achieve their aims without exposing themselves completely. Isolation served as the quiet consequence of falling outside these networks. A woman who lacked allies found corridors colder, rooms quieter, and invitations fewer. Others did not openly reject her. They simply stopped acknowledging her presence. When she approached a group, conversations paused. When she walked into the hall, heads turned away. None of this broke any rule. Yet the message was unmistakable. She no longer belonged to the inner structure that determined influence. For those who succeeded in forming alliances, the court became more manageable. Shared information flowed freely. Warnings arrived before danger took shape. A woman who learned of a rival's ambitions could prepare herself with the help of her allies. These small acts of cooperation strengthened their positions without drawing attention. The palace viewed their closeness as ordinary companionship, unaware of the strategy beneath it. Women often tested each other before committing to these alliances. A careful compliment, delivered in a hallway, might reveal how a potential ally responded to subtle overtures. A small favor offered without explanation might signal availability. A shared criticism of a common rival could seal the first layer of trust. None of these interactions involved open confession. They were quiet evaluations, determining whether cooperation was possible. A woman who excelled at forming alliances became more powerful than her official role suggested. She could influence the distribution of servants, the arrangement of seating at feasts, and the flow of information throughout the court. Her allies, spread across different households and ranks, ensured she never acted alone. She used her network to redirect gossip, strengthen her reputation, and weaken those who threatened her. This influence, though unseen, touched nearly every corner of the palace. Sometimes, these alliances turned into instruments of intimidation. A woman might receive an invitation to tea from someone whose intentions were unclear. The meeting itself could be cordial, filled with polite conversation and warm gestures. Yet beneath the surface, tension lingered. The woman extended the invitation not to build friendship but to remind her guest that she possessed connections. The guest, recognizing the implications, left the room with a sense of unease. Even friendliness felt dangerous in this environment. The king and male courtiers often underestimated these networks. They observed the gatherings of women and assumed they were merely social rituals. They did not recognize that these gatherings influenced opinions, redirected loyalties, and shaped subtle policies long before any decision reached the throne. Women understood that power did not always require authority. Sometimes it required presence, and sometimes it required proximity to those who possessed authority. Over time, these alliances became woven into the court's rhythm. Women who understood how to navigate them gained stability, while those who ignored them found themselves exposed. Their influence spread quietly, through shared looks, coordinated actions, and unspoken agreements. No contracts were written. No promises were declared. Yet the weight of these alliances altered the palace more profoundly than many official decisions. Their connections shifted the court's balance long before words revealed anything, guiding outcomes through gestures that appeared routine. Nothing about these gatherings was as gentle as it looked. However polite they seemed, behind one shared cup of tea, another alignment waited to take form. Marriage arrangements in the Tudor court were never simple matters of family growth or private affection. For women, these decisions carried the weight of long-term strategy. Their children's futures acted as extensions of their own ambitions, shaping alliances that reached far beyond the household. A mother who secured a strong match for her son or daughter gained not only pride, but a significant increase in her standing. Her influence deepened, and rivals watched her more carefully. In this world, a child's marriage functioned as a calculated move on an invisible board where each position mattered. Mothers studied the shifting landscape with discipline. They noted which families gained favor, which lost it, and which hovered in uncertainty. A potential spouse represented more than companionship. They embodied access to resources, protection, and pathways toward influence. When rumors circulated about an advantageous match, mothers began their quiet work. They met with servants who carried information, observed behavior at gatherings, and tracked subtle changes in proximity to the king. A good marriage could elevate an entire household for decades. A poor one could bury it. Education served as the earliest stage of this competition. Mothers invested in tutors who could instill refinement, languages, scripture, and proper deportment. A child who demonstrated intelligence and composure became far more valuable in the marriage market. Mothers corrected posture, adjusted speech, and monitored manners with relentless attention. Their rivals did the same, creating a silent race in which the smallest misstep could cause lasting consequences. A child's failure reflected directly upon the mother, while a child's excellence enhanced her reputation. Within private chambers, these ambitions took shape through small routines. Lessons began at dawn, followed by practice in music or stitching. Mothers watched from the edges of the room, their expressions steady but alert. They corrected mistakes quietly, reminding their children that appearances carried weight. While the children internalized these lessons as part of daily life, the mothers recognized them as tools for shaping their future. Their rivals, observing the progress of these children, adjusted their own strategies accordingly. When the time approached to arrange a marriage, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations that once centered on clothing or seasonal feasts grew heavy with calculation. Mothers exchanged polite remarks about one another's children, concealing the nervous assessments beneath their words. They visited noble households, bringing carefully curated gifts meant to demonstrate stability and refinement. Servants whispered about the suitability of potential matches, passing information between women who relied on these subtle signals. A child placed in a prestigious marriage brought prestige not only to the family, but to the mother specifically. Courtiers acknowledged her influence, seeing in her the ability to navigate the court's complexities. This recognition strengthened her position, granting her leverage in future negotiations. Others, aware of her growing power, sometimes withdrew in caution or sought alliances with her. In the Tudor court, influence rarely stood still. It shifted according to who could secure the best outcomes for their children. Yet the pressure of this competition weighed heavily on families. Children sensed the expectations placed upon them, even if they did not understand their full extent. Their smiles during gatherings, their careful bows, and their soft greetings were observed by mothers who measured each gesture. A child who hesitates at the wrong moment might jeopardize months of preparation. A child who excelled offered relief that quickly transformed into renewed ambition. In this environment, affection became intertwined with strategy, blurring the line between personal care and political necessity. Tensions grew especially sharp when two mothers pursued the same potential spouse. Polite greetings hid a deeper conflict. During banquets, they monitored each other's movements. During church services, they compared which child knelt with more composure. Each small detail served as evidence of superiority or inferiority. While fathers often participated in the formal negotiations, it was the mothers who orchestrated the groundwork. They knew how to present their children in ways that appealed to families seeking reliability, dignity, and upward mobility. Some women relied on gossip to strengthen their positions. They shared soft remarks about another family's instability or questioned a child's temperament without stating anything directly. These suggestions traveled quickly, shaping opinions before any formal discussion occurred. A mother who excelled at this could shift the entire direction of a negotiation. Others, wary of such tactics, guarded their reputations fiercely and avoided situations that might expose them to rumor. Despite the quiet ruthlessness of these competitions, moments of genuine worry pierced through. Mothers feared misjudging a match or failing to prepare their children adequately. They feared aligning with families whose fortunes might collapse. They feared choosing a path that would bring their children pain instead of stability. These concerns remained unspoken, buried beneath calm expressions meant to project confidence. No matter how meticulously they planned, uncertainty lingered. Ultimately, mothers in the Tudor court understood that legacy extended far beyond material possessions. Their true inheritance lay in the alliances formed through their children. A daughter married into a respected household and secured protection. A son aligned with a powerful family brought new opportunities. Social standing, once reinforced through these marriages, shaped the family's future for generations. Women who mastered this realm gained influence that others envied, yet rarely acknowledged openly. Their careful shaping of their children's futures altered the court more deeply than any spoken decree, linking households through decisions made in quiet rooms. Nothing about these choices was simple, however gentle they appeared. Under one hopeful smile, another calculation waited to press forward. Ladies-in-waiting moved through the Tudor court with a quiet presence that few questioned. They carried clothing, arranged jewels, prepared rooms, and remained near the noble women they served from morning until night. Their tasks appeared gentle, even mundane, yet they occupied the most dangerous position in the palace. A lady-in-waiting heard more than she should, saw more than she admitted, and understood more than she revealed. Noble women recognized this clearly, which is why they placed their allies among the servants whenever possible. A well-positioned attendant could shift the balance of power with nothing more than a repeated phrase. The presence of these women in private chambers created opportunities for subtle control. A lady-in-waiting who owed loyalty to a noblewoman watched the room closely, monitoring visitors, overhearing conversations, and noting any unusual behavior. She observed how her mistress reacted to political developments, to personal conflict, and to household rumors. Her impressions traveled back to the noblewoman who had placed her there, forming a steady pulse of information that guided decisions. Even when silence filled the chambers, information flowed. In dressing rooms, where noblewomen prepared for feasts or audiences, secrets escaped through casual remarks. A woman might complain about a rival, unaware that her attendants listened with sharpened attention. She might express doubts about a marriage negotiation or worry about a rumor circulating in court. These comments, spoken as private frustrations, rarely stayed within the room. A lady-in-waiting could repeat them discreetly, reshaping alliances long before the original speaker realized her mistake. Some attendants learned to draw out information without appearing curious. They asked simple questions while adjusting a sleeve or fastening a clasp. Questions framed as polite conversation rather than inquiries. Their calm expressions masked their purpose. They watched a noblewoman's face carefully, noting which topics unsettle her, which anger her, and which expose her vulnerabilities. These observations moved through the court silently, influencing strategies that felt detached from their origin. Other attendants served as messengers, though rarely by official assignment. They carried news between households, delivering subtle hints about upcoming changes or growing tensions. Their presence allowed information to travel quickly, bypassing the barriers that noble women faced. A whispered comment exchanged in a corridor became a foothold for prediction. A nod from a rival suggested the beginning of a shift. A single overheard sentence could reorganize priorities for the week ahead. Noble women understood this risk and guarded themselves carefully. Some refused to speak freely in front of attendants, limiting conversation to ritual topics. Others developed the skill of speaking in layered phrases, statements that sounded harmless but carried meaning only to those who knew the context. Their attendants listened, but without proper knowledge. They could not grasp the full implications. This protected some women, but others relied heavily on their attendants and could not hide their emotions. These women became easy targets. Rumors involving attendants gained momentum quickly. If a lady-in-waiting expressed even slight sympathy toward a rival household, nobles grew suspicious. They watched her movements closely, questioning whether she carried information between factions. An attendant accused of divided loyalty found herself caught in a dangerous position. She had little power to defend herself and no authority to claim protection. Noble women could dismiss her quietly, replacing her with someone more reliable. Such dismissals rarely stayed secret. Other households interpreted them as signs of shifting alliances. Attendants also influenced how noble women presented themselves. They selected fabrics, adjusted hairstyles, and ensured that appearances matched expectations. A woman who looked unsettled during preparation allowed her attendants to glimpse her emotional state. If those attendants shared their impressions, even unintentionally, rivals might respond with strategic timing. Appearing calm became another form of self-defense, one that began in the dressing room long before the woman entered a public hall. In some cases, a single sentence spoken by an attendant changed the direction of a rivalry. A soft remark about someone's displeasure or insecurity could prompt preemptive action. A noble woman who heard of such vulnerabilities might approach the king differently or alter her behavior during a gathering. She might distance herself from a declining ally or strengthen ties with someone gaining favor. These adjustments, though subtle, influenced the broader atmosphere of the court and positioned women more effectively within it. The most skilled attendants learned to survive by balancing discretion and usefulness. They provided enough information to maintain their value without attracting suspicion. They kept their expressions neutral and their movements efficient, blending into the background while shaping the flow of knowledge. Their presence created a constant tension among noble women, who never fully trusted those serving closest to them. Every gesture, every whispered exchange, reminded them of the delicate nature of control. Despite their low rank, attendants shaped the palace in ways invisible to most courtiers. Their understanding of daily rhythms, personal relationships, and private frustrations allowed them to influence decisions indirectly. They did not speak in councils or stand beside the king, yet their observations touched those who did. Their impact remained hidden, but it was unmistakable. Their quiet movements carried more weight than many realized, guiding decisions through details gathered in narrow rooms. Nothing in those private spaces unfolded without consequence. However ordinary it seemed, beneath one unguarded remark, another strategy was prepared to shift the court once again. Compliments in the Tudor court carried a weight that few dared to acknowledge openly. Women offered them with gentle voices, lowered eyes, and polite smiles, creating an atmosphere of warmth that concealed something sharper. A well-timed word of praise could ease tension or deepen it. It depended entirely on the intent hidden behind the tone. For many noble women, a compliment served as a mask, an elegant cover for judgment, rivalry, or quiet retaliation. They learned early that sweetness could deliver harm more efficiently than accusation. During gatherings, these compliments drifted across the room like threads of silk. A woman might step toward a rival, touch the sleeve of her gown, and admire its colour. The gesture seemed friendly, but the pause that followed often revealed more. She might comment on how daring the choice of fabric was, or how difficult such a style could be to carry with grace. The surface remained pleasant, but beneath it, the remark reminded the rival of risks she had taken. What appeared to be encouragement became a reminder of vulnerability. Gifts served the same subtle purpose. A box of scented oils, a piece of embroidered linen, or a small mirror edged with silver. Each object looked harmless, even generous. Yet the meaning attached to the gift depended on the relationship between the women. A gift given to someone experiencing difficulty could be interpreted as sympathy or condescension. A gift offered to someone rising too quickly could be a warning. The giver determined which it would be, while the receiver tried to decipher the message without showing uncertainty. Some women specialized in these gestures. They approached others with soft voices, careful movements, and expressions of gentle affection. Their appearance created trust where none should have existed. They knew when to offer comfort and when to withhold it. They used their sweetness as a net, drawing others closer before redirecting the situation in their favor. Rivals who underestimated them often realized too late that kindness had been employed as a weapon. The court valued politeness, making these tactics even more effective. A woman could not respond sharply to a comment that sounded supportive. She could not refuse a gift without seeming ungrateful. She was trapped within the expectations of courtesy, forced to accept every gesture while trying to understand its true purpose. Her confusion became part of the attack. By the time she recognized the hidden insult, the moment had passed, leaving her unable to defend herself. During feasts, these interactions became particularly visible. Women seated across from each other exchanged compliments that carried more tension than the conversation surrounding them. One might praise another woman's recent success, while emphasizing how unexpected it had been. Another might admire the resilience of someone who had clearly struggled. The dining hall, filled with polite words that concealed rivalry as effectively as shadows concealed movement. Even religious settings did not escape this behavior. In the chapel, where humility was expected, women offered blessings and good wishes with a sincerity that felt practiced. They might pray for another woman's health in a tone that suggested fragility. They might speak of someone's patience in a manner that hinted at weakness. Their words wrapped judgments in gentle phrasing, making them harder to confront. Mothers used these tactics within their own circles as well. A compliment directed toward a rival's child often carried double meaning. Praising a child's behavior might emphasize a flaw in the mother. Admiring a child's appearance could highlight a deficiency in another woman's family. These remarks, though spoken lightly, influenced how others viewed both families. The mothers who excelled at this form of manipulation strengthened their positions while appearing gracious. The danger of these gestures lay in their plausibility. A compliment could not be proven harmful. A gift had no explicit threat. A blessing sounded peaceful. Women who employed these tactics understood that their rivals had no recourse. Any attempt to challenge the meaning behind the gestures risked ridicule. They would be accused of overreacting, of imagining tension where none existed. The court favored those who maintained composure, not those who sought to expose hidden barbs. Despite their elegance, these interactions placed immense pressure on women. They lived in a world where words were never simply words. Every exchange carried layers of meaning. Every smile required analysis. They spent evenings replaying conversations, trying to determine whether they had been supported or undermined. This constant vigilance shaped their behavior, forcing them into roles defined as much by caution as by ambition. The most skilled women delivered their verbal blows with precision. They ensured that no single remark seemed cruel on its own. Rather, they created patterns over time, Small reminders of past failures, subtle acknowledgements of limitations, and soft praises that diminished rather than elevated. Their rivals, worn down by these moments, began to doubt themselves. Doubt, once established, became its own form of defeat. In the end, sweetness proved as dangerous as any open hostility. Compliments and gifts moved through the court with deceptive charm, disarming those who hoped for genuine warmth. The polite surface concealed darker intentions, turning courtesies into tools of quiet war. Their gentle words shifted reputations more effectively than any argument, guiding perceptions with touches of kindness that were anything but innocent. Nothing about these exchanges remained harmless once their impact settled. Beneath one polished blessing, another intention waited to rise. Visits between noblewomen in the Tudor court carried a significance that far exceeded their polite appearance. A simple knock on the door, a soft greeting, or a short stay in another household often concealed motives carefully shaped long before the visit occurred. Women understood that these encounters allowed them to observe rivals in their own surroundings, spaces where emotions slipped through edges of composure and where details revealed more than words. A visit that looked friendly from the outside often unfolded with tension just beneath the surface. When a noblewoman arrived at another's residence, servants watched closely. The visitor's posture, the gifts she carried, and the expression she held as she stepped inside became points of speculation. A warm smile suggested comfort, while a steady gaze hinted at evaluation. The host, though outwardly welcoming, analyzed these elements with equal care. Her surroundings, hastily arranged by attendants, reflected her stability. Any sign of disorder risked becoming a topic whispered later by the visitor's household. During these visits, women rarely spoke directly about their intentions. Instead, they relied on pauses in conversation, observations of the room, and seemingly casual remarks. A visitor might compliment a tapestry while noting a new addition to the household staff. She might inquire about the host's health in a tone that suggested concern, or perhaps suspicion. Each phrase carried dual meaning, allowing the listener to decide whether it offered support or a subtle attack. These conversations tested a woman's ability to maintain composure under scrutiny. Illness provided opportunities for even sharper exchanges. When a noblewoman fell sick, tradition required others to visit her. These visits appeared compassionate, but the underlying motives varied. Some women arrived to evaluate the severity of the illness, whether it threatened the household's stability or created vulnerabilities they could exploit. They observed the patient's posture, the color in her face, and the movements of her hands. A weak appearance might reinforce the visitor's confidence. A strong, defiant expression could unsettle her. In sick rooms, gestures revealed more than speech. A woman who placed her hand gently over the patient's might intend comfort. But she also measured warmth, strength, or trembling. A woman who adjusted the blankets or smoothed the pillows used the gesture to display authority, reminding the patient that she held control even in this private space. These acts, though harmless on the surface, allowed rivals to assess one another at close range. Some visits exposed ambition more than compassion. A noblewoman might bring an extravagant basket of fruit or herbs, wanting the household to recognize her generosity. She might arrive with a skilled healer, implying that the host lacked adequate care. Such gestures embarrassed the patient while signaling dominance. Others brought smaller gifts, simple cloth or modest flowers, only to remark on the importance of humility, casting quiet judgment on anyone who lived too comfortably. Women often left these encounters feeling unsettled, unsure whether they had been supported or undermined. They replayed conversations, searching for intentions hidden beneath soft words. A compliment might have suggested weakness rather than admiration. A question about household finances might have exposed interest in internal troubles. The uncertainty became part of the strategy. A rival who could disrupt another woman's peace of mind gained advantage without needing confrontation. Occasionally, these visits served as opportunities to gather information. A visitor observing an unusual number of servants might suspect new alliances. A glimpse of correspondence on a table could hint at political involvement. Even the patient's room, its furnishings, its scents, and its arrangement offered clues about priorities and struggles. Women trained themselves to gather these details while appearing engaged in polite conversation. Hosts attempted to control what their visitors saw. They hid documents, rearranged furniture, and instructed servants to remain silent unless spoken to. Yet even these precautions revealed tension. A visitor who noticed the sudden absence of familiar attendants or the hurried adjustment of curtains might interpret the behavior as concealment. Whether accurate or not, the impression shaped her future calculations. Some visits aimed not to observe, but to intimidate. A woman entering a rival's home with confidence, supported by well-dressed attendants, demonstrated strength. She moved through the rooms deliberately, forcing the host to follow her pace. She commented on the household's condition with a tone that lingered between politeness and evaluation. By the time she departed, the host felt the imbalance clearly, reminded that she existed under constant watch. Yet even the smallest gestures carried significance. A glance at a piece of jewelry suggested awareness of family connections. A soft remark about the changing season hinted at preparation for events the host might not be ready to face. A brief touch on the arm communicated superiority, compassion, or warning depending on the context. Women learn to read these gestures with precision, trusting them more than spoken words. Despite the quiet hostility underlying many visits, they remained essential. Women used them to assess shifting loyalties, test the strength of rivals, and protect their own households from unexpected challenges. Avoiding these visits signaled fear or weakness. Participating in them required discipline, patience, and the ability to control reactions under pressure. In the Tudor court, these encounters shaped alliances and rivalries more deeply than official meetings or public declarations. Their measured steps across each threshold altered relationships long before intentions became visible, guiding the court through movements that appeared gentle. Nothing in these visits remained purely social once the atmosphere settled. Underneath one polite exchange, another agenda gathered strength. Friendship between a Tudor woman and a man outside her family existed in a space that felt both necessary and dangerous. The court relied heavily on male advisors, courtiers, and attendants who shaped daily politics, and women often needed their cooperation to navigate shifting alliances. Yet any bond that appeared too close risked stirring suspicion. A woman could speak with a man only long enough to gain what she needed, but not so long that others questioned her intentions. The distance between respect and scandal narrowed into a fragile line she had to maintain with constant awareness. Conversations between women and male courtiers unfolded carefully. A woman might approach a trusted advisor for information, lowering her voice while keeping her posture formal. She listened with steady calm, ensuring no warmth slipped into her tone. Every gesture required control. A hand resting too long on a table, a smile held a moment beyond what propriety demanded. These small movements could invite whispers, and whispers, once they began, rarely settled. Despite the risks, women sought these connections because men held access to knowledge they could not obtain alone. Male courtiers moved freely through councils, hunting parties, and diplomatic gatherings. They heard decisions long before they spread through the palace corridors. A woman who developed a subtle, respectful rapport with one of them gained insight that could shield her from danger or help her act before rivals expected. Influence often depended on receiving the right information at the right time, but the court observed these interactions closely. A woman seen speaking privately with a man might find herself the subject of murmured speculation by the afternoon. The angle of her head, the stillness of her hands, or the distance between their steps became points of interpretation. Some women learned to reduce these risks by speaking in the presence of attendants, using their presence as a silent barrier. Others arranged conversations within open rooms, making their interactions appear purely formal. Yet none of these precautions fully erased the danger. Men, too, understood the delicacy of these arrangements. A courtier aware that a woman's reputation could be damaged by his proximity often spoke in measured tones. He avoided letting admiration show, especially if her beauty or composure tempted his attention. He kept his hands behind his back, his posture rigid, his expression neutral. Yet, even with restraint, misunderstandings arose easily. A single misinterpreted glance, a moment of shared silence, or a rumor born from jealousy could transform caution into peril. For some women, the danger became part of the strategy. They approached men with confidence, using charm as a tool without allowing attachment. They learned how to steer conversations, how to remain soft without seeming inviting, and how to extract information while appearing indifferent. Their skill lay in appearing friendly enough to keep doors open, but distant enough to avoid court gossip. This balance required discipline. Any shift in tone might cause a man to overestimate her interest or an onlooker to misjudge her purpose. Other women found themselves trapped by their own sincerity. They sought advice earnestly, not recognizing how easily sincerity could resemble affection. A man who misunderstood her intentions might linger too long in her presence, or fail to conceal his admiration. Once others noticed, the situation spiraled beyond her control. She could deny rumors, plead her innocence, and avoid him entirely. But suspicion remained. The court clung to stories that blended truth and invention until the distinction no longer mattered. These scandals struck women far more harshly than men. A male courtier accused of impropriety might suffer temporary embarrassment. A woman accused of overstepping boundaries risked losing her position, her alliance, and her future. Her enemies watched for such missteps, ready to use them as evidence of moral weakness. Even if the accusations faded, the memory lingered in quiet corners of the palace. No woman recovered fully from a stain on her reputation. Some women attempted to shield themselves by involving their husbands in these connections. They framed conversations with courtiers as matters of household interest or diplomatic necessity. A husband's presence offered legitimacy, but it also introduced new challenges. If he mistrusted her judgment, the alliance would be strained. If he relied too heavily on her insight, others questioned who truly influenced him. The web of consequences expanded until even harmless interactions carried political weight. Yet for all the risks, abandoning these bonds entirely left a woman dangerously uninformed. Isolation made her vulnerable to manipulation by rivals who maintained subtle alliances with powerful men. She needed access to knowledge, and knowledge flowed through male channels. So she adjusted her behavior, acting with deliberate calm. She learned to speak in the right moments and remain silent in others. Her composure became her safeguard, masking fear beneath practiced stillness. Court life demanded this balance. Intimacy without closeness, reliance without dependence, connection without suspicion. Women who understood this survived. Women who misjudged it paid heavily. Their measured conversations shaped alliances before anyone recognized the direction, guiding outcomes through moments that looked harmless. Nothing about these exchanges stayed simple once perception shifted. Under one carefully polite greeting, another risk waited to surface. Letters passed between Tudor women with a quiet elegance that concealed their true purpose. Written in careful script and folded with precision, they appeared harmless to anyone who saw them delivered by a servant or tucked inside a sleeve. Yet each letter carried layers of intent, shaped by rivalry as much as courtesy. Women learned early that writing allowed them to say what their voices could not risk, and to question others without speaking a word aloud. A letter was both a shield and a blade, depending on how it was read. The opening lines of these letters often contained polite greetings. A woman might inquire about another's health, praise a recent feast, or express admiration for a gown seen at the last gathering. But behind these phrases sat hints of something else: doubt, curiosity, or subtle reminders of social imbalance. A single phrase placed slightly out of context could unsettle the reader. She wondered whether the tone suggested genuine friendship or polite scrutiny. The uncertainty forced her to read more cautiously. Women used written language to expose what they could not voice directly. If a rumor circulated about shifting alliances, a letter might ask about a recent visit or a quiet meeting seen in a hallway. The question, framed innocently, created pressure. The recipient knew she must respond carefully, avoiding any implication that she had acted improperly. Even silence carried meaning. A delayed response signaled hesitation. A quick reply suggested urgency. Timing became as important as the words themselves. Some women mastered the art of writing in layers. They crafted sentences that appeared simple, yet carried 2 or 3 possible interpretations. A compliment could also hint at envy. A warning disguised itself as concern. A remark about another woman's increasing influence invited speculation about competition. The recipient often read the letter multiple times, searching for the true message. By the time she finished, the seed of doubt had already taken root. Servants who delivered these letters played an unspoken role in the exchange. Their presence reminded women that messages traveled through unpredictable hands. A careless gesture from a servant or a glance while handing over a letter could suggest that its contents were already known. Whether or not the servant had read it did not matter. The possibility alone heightened tension, turning each letter into a delicate risk. Women protected themselves by choosing their words with discipline. They avoided accusations, relying instead on implication. They softened their tone with careful phrases, ensuring that nothing could be used against them directly. The court accepted written messages as part of daily life. Yet these messages shaped perceptions more deeply than spoken conversation. Written words left traces. They could be shown to others, repeated, or interpreted long after the moment passed. During political uncertainty, letters multiplied. Women exchanged updates about marriages, alliances, and shifting loyalties. These exchanges felt necessary, but they also exposed vulnerabilities. A letter sent to the wrong person, or intercepted without warning, could alter the writer's position. Some women sealed their letters with elaborate wax marks to discourage tampering, though even that offered limited protection. Those who relied too heavily on written communication risked losing control of their own words. In more subtle uses, letters tested the strength of relationships. A woman who wanted to measure another's loyalty might send a message expressing mild concern or curiosity. If the reply arrived with excessive formality, she sensed distance. If it arrived with warmth, she sensed opportunity. These written exchanges became a form of quiet negotiation, shaping alliances through paper rather than spoken trust. Certain letters carried the weight of a warning. A woman might hint that rumors were spreading or that a rival spoke unfavorably about the recipient. She framed the information as protection, an attempt to help. But the warning itself reminded the recipient that she was vulnerable. It pushed her to act quickly, sometimes unwisely. These warnings often benefited the sender more than the one who received them. In the rare moments when letters turned openly hostile, they did so through refinement rather than aggression. A writer might politely refuse an invitation, noting an unspecified obligation. She might mention that she heard something curious during a recent gathering, without stating details. Each refusal and remark chipped away at the recipient's sense of stability. The hostility, disguised as courtesy, felt sharper because it left no clear target for retaliation. Even the act of not responding became a strategy. A woman who ignored a letter signaled dismissal without engaging directly. The recipient, left waiting, felt the pressure of silence. She wondered whether she had offended, whether she had failed to hide something, whether others had received different letters suggesting advantage. Silence created unease more effectively than accusation. Despite their elegance, these letters shaped rivalries in ways few outside the court understood. They guided decisions, strained friendships, and shifted power quietly. Women lived with the knowledge that any written word might return to them altered, misinterpreted, or used against them. And yet they continued to write, because writing allowed them to maneuver in a world where speech carried too much risk. Their letters shifted alliances before anyone recognized the direction, shaping outcomes through phrases wrapped in courtesy. Nothing in their writing remained harmless once its meaning settled. Beneath one graceful line, another intention prepared to emerge. Silence in the Tudor court carried a weight far heavier than most spoken words. Women learned early that restraint shaped perception more effectively than argument, and that holding back a response often unsettled rivals more deeply than any accusation. A woman who refused to answer did not appear weak. She appeared calculating. Her stillness created a void that others rushed to interpret. And in that rush, they exposed their own anxieties. Silence became a choice, a weapon sharpened through discipline rather than emotion. In corridors where gossip shifted daily, silence created uncertainty. When a woman heard her name spoken in whispers and chose not to respond, she forced others to question their assumptions. Her composure unsettled them. They watched for the slightest sign. A tightened hand, a quickened breath, but she offered none. Her calm expression suggested knowledge they lacked, suggesting she understood more than she let on. This imbalance pushed her rivals into caution, sometimes even retreat. At gatherings, silence shaped the atmosphere more sharply than conversation. A woman seated among others might listen carefully, her face unreadable while the discussion moved around her. Even those not speaking became aware of her presence. If she glanced towards someone without altering her expression, that small gesture shifted expectations. Rivals wondered whether she judged them, whether she intended to act, whether she had already done so. Her quietness forced them to examine themselves rather than confront her. When accusations or rumors surfaced, silence carried even more weight. A woman confronted indirectly, through hints, implications, or questions, often chose not to defend herself immediately. She allowed the accusation to rest in the air. Refusing to ease the discomfort of others, her silence created doubt about the truth of the rumor, not because it suggested innocence or guilt, but because it removed clarity. Those observing her could not determine her position, leaving them to wonder whether they had misjudged the situation entirely. The power of silence extended into private chambers as well. A woman receiving a letter filled with subtle warnings or inquiries might read it calmly and set it aside without answering. The sender, expecting a strategic reply, felt the pressure growing with each passing day. She reconsidered her own message, questioning whether she had revealed too much or appeared too anxious. The lack of response echoed louder than any written phrase. Silence transformed a simple letter into a burden carried by the sender alone. During conflicts, disguised as polite interaction, silence served as a barrier. A woman who listened without offering emotion denied her rival access to her inner landscape. Her opponent could not predict how she would react or what she planned. Conversations that relied on subtle provocation became ineffective. The rival's attempts to unsettle her dissolved into quiet tension. Silence revealed who held control, not through dominance, but through unshakable stillness. Even in moments of personal fear, silence became a strategy. A woman sensing her position weakening might respond by narrowing her interactions, speaking only when required, allowing others to interpret the quiet however they wished. Her restraint created the illusion of strength, even if she felt none. Rivals hesitated to strike at someone who seemed untouched by panic. Silence shielded her weaknesses, buying time until she could reposition herself. Some women mastered this strategy so thoroughly that silence became their signature. They rarely spoke during feasts, rarely engaged in gossip, and rarely revealed more than a measured opinion. Their absence from unnecessary conversation earned them reputations for insight. When they finally chose to speak, the court listened, believing their silence had distilled their thoughts rather than masked their caution. Their words gained more influence because they were rare. Yet silence demanded discipline. It required suppressing instinct, the urge to defend, correct, accuse, or justify. Women who relied on silence learned to maintain stillness, even under scrutiny. They understood that revealing emotion undermined the effectiveness of their restraint. Silence functioned as armor, but armor grew heavy. They carried that weight through corridors, chambers, and gatherings, never letting it slip. Those who faced this kind of silence often found themselves at a disadvantage. A rival who expected an emotional reaction instead received a blank expression. Her attempts to provoke frustration or fear collapsed. She questioned whether her strategy was flawed. She wondered whether the silent woman knew something she did not. This uncertainty weakened her, shifting power to the one who remained still. Over time, silence shaped the court's rhythm as deeply as speech. It allowed women to navigate conflicts without exposing themselves. It complicated rivalries, strengthened defenses, and revealed vulnerabilities through contrast. A loud room could feel tense simply because one woman refused to speak. Her restraint reminded others how fragile their positions were. Silence never existed without consequence. It pushed some women into desperation, others into strategy, and still others into reflection. It carved paths through the palace that few recognized until they followed them unintentionally. Their restraint altered outcomes long before words could intervene, guiding perceptions through absence rather than presence. Nothing about their stillness remained simple once tension settled. Under one steady, expressionless gaze, another shift prepared to take hold. Religion in the Tudor court offered women a kind of shelter that few other spaces allowed. Within the chapel's dim light and soft echoes, nobles could present themselves as humble and disciplined, protected by the expectation that no one questioned devotion. Some women used this shelter with sincere intent, but others recognized the strategic value hidden inside the ritual. Piety, when displayed with precision, could conceal ambition more effectively than silence or courtesy. A woman who appeared deeply devout often escaped scrutiny, even when her movements shaped the court far more than her prayers suggested. These women understood that the appearance of devotion mattered more than its truth. They attended services with unwavering regularity, arriving early and kneeling with practiced stillness. Their eyes remained fixed on the altar, their hands folded tightly, their expressions composed. To observers, their posture implied purity. They seemed separate from the rivalries that defined daily life. But beneath the chapel's calm atmosphere, these gestures functioned as deliberate statements of harmlessness. A woman who appeared above worldly conflict could pursue her goals with less suspicion. Small details reinforced these impressions. A woman might carry a worn prayer book, its edges softened by use, though her attention to it was more calculated than emotional. She might join hymns with a voice quiet enough to sound modest, but steady enough to attract admiration. These choices shaped perception in ways others struggled to counter. While rivals exchanged glances or whispered rumors, the devout woman shielded herself with ritual, her movements suggesting discipline rather than manipulation. Hypocrisy thrived in this environment because it remained unprovable. A woman could behave with flawless decorum inside the chapel, then participate in political maneuvering the moment she stepped outside. No one accused her directly. Even those who suspected her motives hesitated to confront someone who appeared morally upright. A challenge against a devout woman risked backlash, as it implied irreverence or envy. She used this hesitation to her advantage, moving through the court with a calmness that concealed intention. These performances extended beyond the chapel. A woman hoping to strengthen her influence might increase her charitable acts, distributing bread or cloth to servants. She ensured that word of her generosity reached the right ears. She offered blessings to families experiencing hardship, kneeling beside them with a gentleness that made her seem unthreatening. Her rivals recognized the tactic too late. By the time suspicion formed, her image as a beacon of virtue had already taken hold. Even private conversations became extensions of this strategy. A woman who wanted to undermine a rival might frame her concerns in moral language. She spoke softly about the importance of purity, obedience, or humility, allowing her words to drift toward her target without confronting her directly. These remarks did not accuse, they implied. Those listening interpreted them through their own anxieties. And doubt grew quietly. The devout woman maintained an expression of concern, claiming only to care for the soul of another. Confession offered yet another layer of control. A woman might visit a priest frequently. Entering the confessional with an air of sorrow, she spoke of temptations, frustrations, and fears that sounded sincere. The priest could not repeat her confessions, but his changed demeanor hinted that he carried heavy concerns. Others, observing his interaction with her, assumed depth where none existed. When he offered guidance to her publicly, it reinforced her image as someone constantly striving for virtue. The attention she received from religious authority added weight to her social standing. In moments of tension, devotion provided a shield that competitors struggled to penetrate. A woman accused of wrongdoing could deflect questions by emphasizing her spiritual commitments. She attended additional services, donated to the church, or aligned herself with respected clergy. Her rivals, aware of her strategic intent, could do little. Any attempt to expose her manipulation risked making them appear irrelevant or jealous. Some women used religious ritual to redirect attention entirely. If rumors formed about their ambitions, they increased their participation in public displays of faith. They walked slowly through the chapel aisles, holding prayer beads between their fingers. They closed their eyes during hymns, allowing the appearance of spiritual absorption to silence speculation. Their restraint suggested innocence, even righteousness. The court, eager for symbols of stability, accepted the illusion. But behind these gestures lay an emotional cost. Maintaining piety as performance required constant vigilance. A woman needed to monitor her voice, her movements, and her expressions, ensuring nothing contradicted her crafted image. She lived in a state of tension, aware that one misstep could expose her hypocrisy. The chapel that offered safety also demanded discipline. The role she played protected her, but it isolated her as well. Still, the advantages outweighed the burdens. A woman perceived as devout gained access to sympathy, trust, and leniency, resources rare in a world shaped by rivalry. Others stepped carefully around her, uncertain whether their suspicions justified action. She moved through the court with an aura of quiet authority, her moral posture creating distance that shielded her intentions. In this way, religion became more than belief. It became a strategy. Their displays of devotion reshaped perception long before intent could be questioned, guiding influence through gestures wrapped in reverence. Nothing in these rituals stayed innocent once ambition settled. Beneath one bowed head, another purpose waited to rise. Information in the Tudor court moved with deliberate slowness, shaped not by truth but by intention. Women understood that news, when repeated with careful timing, could alter reputations more effectively than confrontation. They learned to share fragments rather than full stories, to emphasize certain details while letting others fade, and to deliver each piece with a calm that concealed its design. Nothing spreads by accident. Every whisper carried purpose. Selective transmission became one of their most reliable tools. A woman who wished to redirect suspicion might mention a small incident to someone known for curiosity. She chose her words with restraint, never accusing, only observing. By the time the story reached its third listener, the meaning had shifted. The recipient began to question whether the woman being discussed had acted inappropriately or whether she had misjudged her surroundings. Doubt rooted itself quietly, making further clarification unnecessary. Once doubt began, a woman's position weakened. Invitations arrived less frequently. Glances grew sharper. A rival used this tension to push her slightly farther from influence. She needed no open attack. She simply allowed the story to keep moving. The court, always hungry for subtle shifts, paid attention not to the content of the rumor, but to the reactions surrounding it. Hesitation suggested guilt. Confidence suggested deflection. Silence, though powerful in other contexts, risked appearing evasive. Women who spread these stories never looked hurried. They shared their observations while adjusting a piece of lace or rearranging a sleeve, as though their words held no significance. Their tone remained steady, their expression composed. The listener sensed no urgency. This calmness made the information feel credible. A remark spoken sharply might raise suspicion, but a remark offered gently seemed like the truth. Even the smallest details could gain weight. If a woman left a gathering early, someone noted it. If she paused too long before answering a question, someone recorded the hesitation. When repeated selectively, these moments formed a narrative that suggested instability, ambition, or dishonesty. The target often learned of the rumor only after it had already reshaped how others behaved around her. She sensed a shift in the atmosphere before she understood its cause. Not all harmful news moved quickly. Some spread slowly, gathering strength over days or weeks. These stories felt more dangerous because they did not draw attention immediately. They drifted through hallways, carried by servants, attendants, and women who preferred to operate from the background. By the time the story reached the upper ranks of the court, it had softened just enough to sound reasonable. No one could trace its origin, and no one tried. A woman who found herself the subject of such a rumor faced a difficult choice. If she denied it too strongly, she appeared defensive. If she ignored it completely, she allowed the doubt to deepen. She might attempt to counter the rumor by spreading positive information about herself. But this tactic rarely matched the subtle force of the original attack. Negative stories clung more tightly than praise, especially in a world where distrust thrived. Some women attempted to reverse the damage by seeking out those who had heard the rumor. They engaged in polite conversation, demonstrating composure. Their presence challenged the exaggerated image created by gossip. But even then, the effort carried risk. The more they appeared in public, trying to repair the damage, the more others questioned their motives. Each correction resembled validation rather than dismissal. Women who manipulated information relied heavily on timing. They released news when the court felt tense, never when it felt stable. A rivalry intensifying over a marriage arrangement, a shift in the king's mood, or a new arrival at court, all created fertile ground for rumors. During these moments, a small piece of information gained greater strength. Women who recognized these opportunities used them without hesitation, shaping the environment before others reacted. Some stories contained just enough truth to gain traction. A woman might mention an interaction she had observed, crafting it in a way that implied impropriety or uncertainty. Those who heard it, aware that the event had taken place, believed the interpretation. Other stories had no truth at all, yet sounded plausible enough to survive. The court accepted these stories because they fit the expectations of rivalry. Truth mattered less than usefulness. The destruction caused by these rumors rarely happened in a single moment. Instead, it accumulated quietly. A woman found herself excluded from conversations. Her allies distanced themselves to avoid shared suspicion. Her rivals stepped forward with confidence. The shift appeared subtle, almost gentle, but its consequences endured. A damaged reputation required months or years to repair, if repair was possible at all. Women who excelled at this kind of manipulation rarely appeared cruel. Their expressions remained steady, their voices soft, their movements graceful. They understood that power did not require aggression. It required patience. They released information like small drops of ink into clear water, allowing it to spread slowly until the entire surface darkened. Their rivals, caught unaware, struggled to understand how such quiet gestures produce such lasting effects. In the end, information became a form of poison, not swift, not loud, but persistent. Their selective whispers redirected loyalties long before anyone admitted a shift, shaping the court through fragments that sounded harmless. Nothing in their stories stayed contained once suspicion grew. Underneath one softly repeated detail, another downfall waited to form. Banquets in the Tudor world appeared festive, but those who watched closely recognized a field of quiet calculation beneath the music and candlelight. Women entered these gatherings, aware that every gesture, every glance, every placement at the table shaped their standing in ways no formal decree could match. The hall felt warm, yet the air around them carried an unmistakable tension. Status rearranged itself with each seating chart, each invitation granted or withheld, each moment of attention from those who mattered. An invitation alone held meaning. A woman who appeared consistently on guest lists understood she remained within the court's inner circle. Another, receiving fewer summons than before, sensed a shift long before words confirmed it. Silence from the host functioned as a warning. A missing name among many spoke louder than any accusation. Women learned to study not only who attended, but who had been carefully omitted, as these absences revealed the currents they were expected to navigate. Those who did attend stepped into a room arranged with deliberate strategy. The position closest to the king, or a high-ranking noble, carried an unmistakable message about influence. A woman seated near the center of attention often gained opportunities to overhear conversations or reinforce alliances. Meanwhile, another, positioned farther down the table, experienced a subtle but unmistakable cooling. She might smile, offer polite conversation, and maintain composure. Yet the distance carried its own verdict. Throughout the evening, women balanced elegance with caution. They observed the movement of wine cups and serving dishes, noting who received first portions and who waited longer. A host could favor someone by offering a rare delicacy or diminish another by ignoring her plate. These gestures, small to an outside observer, spoke volumes to those living within the court's unspoken hierarchy. Nothing passed unnoticed. A shift in service order indicated a shift in favor. Conversations at these gatherings moved in circles that appeared gentle but contained sharp edges. Women spoke in tones appropriate to celebration, yet each sentence held layers of meaning. A compliment about a gown might suggest prosperity or extravagance. A remark about a recent absence could imply illness, unreliability, or diminished status. Those listening learned to interpret the calm delivery of such words as part of the evening's competition. No argument erupted, but tensions deepened quietly. Even the music contributed to the atmosphere. Musicians played softly, while women exchanged controlled smiles. The blend of sound and candlelight offered a veneer of peace. But beneath this surface, rivalries expanded in silence. A woman observed the king's glance toward another guest and measured how long it lingered. Another watched which nobleman bowed slightly lower to her competitor. Every detail, however minor, carried implications. Clothing served as both armor and declaration. Women selected fabrics that reflected their ambitions without appearing excessive. A gown made from foreign materials hinted at powerful connections. A modest dress signaled humility or strategic restraint. Those who aimed for influence balanced confidence with prudence, ensuring their presence felt noticeable but not provocative. Their attire spoke what their voices could not: strength, intention, and cautious ambition. The interactions between women offered additional insight. Those who walked together through the hall might share trust. But a sudden shift in companionship suggested realignment. A woman whose allies avoided her subtly revealed her waning position. Another who gained new partners signaled rising influence. Nothing about these transitions appeared dramatic. Yet the consequences unfolded long after the music ended. Even the way women handled their cups and utensils mattered. A steady hand conveyed composure. A slight tremor hinted at anxiety. Rivals who noticed such signs carried them into later calculations. A woman's poise became part of her reputation, and reputation shaped her survival as effectively as any political connection. Those who maintained outward calm, even when surrounded by hostility, preserved their standing through endurance. Rumors often gained strength within these gatherings. A whispered comment during the passing of bread, or a quiet remark exchanged behind a pillar, traveled quickly across the hall. Women who wished to influence outcomes used such moments carefully, choosing listeners who repeated things with subtle embellishment. A banquet offered both audience and opportunity. A single, well-timed sentence could spark consequences that stretched far beyond the night's festivities. As the evening progressed, exhaustion sharpened awareness. Women grew more vigilant, knowing that final impressions carried weight. A graceful farewell strengthened alliances. A hurried departure drew suspicion. Even the pace of one's steps contributed to the silent evaluation surrounding each guest. When the candles burned low, women left the hall carrying new insights, new concerns, and new strategies for the days ahead. By the end of the night, the tension that had hovered quietly around the tables settled into memory. The banquet, outwardly joyful, revealed itself as a landscape of shifting loyalties. Women who succeeded did so not through confrontation but through steady observation, careful gestures, and disciplined restraint. The hall returned to darkness, but the consequences of what had taken place continued to echo through the court. Their measured movements through each feast redirected alliances long before the hall grew quiet, shaping influence through gestures wrapped in courtesy. Nothing in these gatherings stayed harmless once rivalry stirred. Behind one polite exchange, another contest was prepared to rise. Silence in the Tudor world often carried a force that women learned to use with deliberate care. Nothing about their daily lives encouraged loud accusations or dramatic clashes. Instead, they shaped outcomes through restraint so precise that those around them felt its weight long before they understood its meaning. A calm expression unsettled more effectively than raised voices, and a steady gaze conveyed truths others preferred not to acknowledge. Women, bound to roles that appeared passive, refined this stillness into an instrument of control. A woman could destroy another's standing without ever raising her tone. One subtle withdrawal from a room, one lack of greeting, one measured pause before offering a comment. These acts built narratives others whispered about. A rival suddenly left out felt the shift immediately. She would sit at meals, sensing eyes turning away, wondering which moment had broken her connection to the circle she once trusted. No confrontation took place, but the absence spread like a quiet stain. Even more dangerous were the women who mastered the art of watching. They listened to conversations without revealing emotion, storing every detail for later use. A slight change in posture from one nobleman, a poorly controlled sigh from another woman, a brief tension during a change in topic. These clues offered paths to advantage. Those who observed became architects of influence. Their silence served as both shield and weapon, protecting their intentions while exposing the weaknesses of others. A quiet remark delivered at the right moment could shift the balance of an entire household. It might be a simple question spoken in a gentle tone, one that implied doubt or concern, The listener, caught off guard, found herself defending something she had never intended to discuss. The remark spread, softened by politeness, yet sharpened by implication. It drifted into other chambers, repeated by those who sensed opportunity. A small sentence, delivered softly, stretched into a new understanding of someone's worth. Women also employed silence as a form of resistance. When they refused to engage with a person or topic, the refusal itself became meaningful. A noble woman declining to comment on a rumor created fertile ground for suspicion. A wife refusing to smile at a gathering stirred questions about her husband's stability. These choices were not impulsive but calculated, designed to disrupt expectation while preserving dignity. Silence, when placed with care, unsettled far more than a noisy objection. Absence carried its own language. When a woman who usually attended every event suddenly stayed away, others noticed. They wondered whom she avoided, what information she carried, or which alliances she reconsidered. Her empty seat at the table became a statement of disapproval or caution. The power of such absence intensified when she did not explain. Those who felt implicated suffered the weight of uncertainty, fearing that she knew something damaging. Within the court, women watched each other's reactions closely. A moment of stillness at hearing someone's name revealed more than any speech. A woman who kept her hands folded neatly while others grew animated appeared disciplined, intentional, and possibly dangerous. This quiet composure suggested that she processed everything while revealing nothing. Those around her became wary, sensing influence without understanding its form. Silence also shaped relationships between women and men. A wife who refrained from questioning her husband's decisions signaled either trust or strategic distance. Men often mistook this quiet for obedience, unaware that their wives gathered information from servants, visitors, and overheard conversations. Women built networks through patience, even as men underestimated them. Their ability to act without declaring intentions gave them flexibility unavailable to louder counterparts. When silence settled across a room, it conveyed the shifting alignment of power. A conversation that suddenly lacked a woman's participation hinted at her disapproval. Another woman stepping back from the circle indicated that she no longer wished to support it. These actions required no explanation. In a world where speech was restricted, silence served as an alternative language with its own grammar and consequences. Women also understood that silence preserved their safety. Conflicts spoken openly invited retaliation, but a quiet gesture, a withheld greeting, or a deliberately controlled expression placed blame elsewhere. The woman who acted in silence protected herself behind propriety. Others struggled to confront her because she had done nothing overt. The ambiguity shielded her from accusation while allowing her influence to spread. The most skilled among them recognized when to remain still during storms of rumor and suspicion, while others scrambled to defend themselves. They waited. Their calmness appeared virtuous, suggesting innocence without explaining. As panic grew around them, they became the stable figures observers trusted. This steadiness, crafted through disciplined restraint, allowed them to rise while others faltered. In the end, women who mastered silence understood its dual nature. It granted them space to observe, to think, and to strike at moments no one predicted. Though restricted by expectations, they found within quietness an authority that reshaped their world. The court believed noise signaled strength. Yet the most enduring victories belonged to those who barely whispered. Their quiet presence altered the room more sharply than raised voices ever could, unsettling those who relied on noise to mask their intentions. Nothing about their restraint felt gentle once its weight settled across the court. Inside that controlled stillness, another outcome was prepared to unfold without warning. Internal conflict followed Tudor women everywhere. Though no one spoke of it aloud, the court valued calm behavior, steady posture, and the appearance of control, even when that control came from struggle rather than ease. A woman learned early that every reaction could be used against her. Any sign of anger, fear, or exhaustion became material for whispers. Because of this, she trained herself to remain still when provoked, to keep her voice level when insulted, and to hold her expression steady even when humiliation pressed against her chest. That discipline was not natural. It was carved into her through years of necessity. The first victory in any confrontation came from refusing to be baited. A rival might offer a sharp comment disguised as politeness, hoping to spark a slip. Others at the table would pause, waiting for the slightest break in composure. But a woman who understood the rules did not let her breath quicken, or her eyes shift. She responded with calm, or said nothing at all. That quiet answer unsettled those who wanted a public reaction. It kept her reputation intact while revealing nothing of her true feelings. Reputation mattered more than truth. A woman who appeared fragile or emotional could lose allies within a day. Because of this, every emotion had to be managed with precision. Disappointment was absorbed silently. Jealousy was hidden behind steady hands. Hurt feelings were left to settle inside private chambers, never allowed to escape into public view. This inner discipline created a version of strength that outsiders rarely appreciated. They saw a composed figure. They did not see the internal labor that made such composure possible. Many women developed quiet routines to keep themselves stable. Some practiced holding their expression in front of polished metal, learning which small movements betrayed too much. Others rehearsed answers for situations they feared, preparing responses that would not expose their vulnerability. Even the act of walking into a crowded hall required mental preparation. A single misstep in posture could be interpreted as fear, guilt, or weakness. For them, self-control was not a virtue, but a tool for survival. They also understood that endurance shaped outcomes more effectively than confrontation. A woman who held her composure through months of tension could wear down a rival who relied on aggression. While others gossiped, accused, or plotted in Hester, she watched and waited. She let impatience expose the weaknesses of those who underestimated her silence. Her restraint created space for opportunities that only appeared when others had exhausted themselves. Some internal battles came from navigating contradictory expectations. A Tudor woman was expected to be obedient, yet perceptive, humble, yet capable of influencing a household, silent in public matters, yet responsible for shaping her family's future. These demands pushed her into constant self-evaluation. She weighed every word before speaking, measured every gesture before lifting her hand. The pressure to never misstep created an exhaustion she carried alone, hidden behind graceful movements. There were moments when emotions surged too strongly. Anger after a betrayal, sorrow after a painful rumor, fear when status slipped unexpectedly. But showing such feelings was dangerous. The court paid close attention to reactions. A quivering lip or tightened jaw could lead to speculation, and speculation became gossip within hours. So she learned to steady her breath, to let the tension settle behind her ribs, to continue as if nothing had changed. That practice hardened her, but it also protected her. Patience became a weapon. A woman who could wait without revealing frustration created uncertainty in others. Rivals wondered what she planned, what she knew, or why she refused to respond. Her calm unsettled them, disrupting their confidence. In these moments, silence did more damage than accusation. The court remembered the woman who stayed composed far longer than it remembered the one who shouted. Over time, this internal discipline shaped identity. The woman who mastered her emotions gained influence not through force, but through steadiness. Her presence carried weight. Others hesitated before crossing her, unsure of what she noticed or what she intended. Though she fought no battles publicly, she won them privately, using endurance as her shield and restraint as her blade. Her victories were often invisible, recognized only by those who understood how much strength it took to remain still. But invisibility did not make them smaller. They were built moment by moment, breath by breath, through quiet decisions that allowed her to survive a world designed to judge her more harshly than any man. Their composure shaped outcomes long before words were spoken, settling tensions with gestures that revealed nothing. Nothing in their posture stayed casual once pressure filled the room. Beneath one steady breath, another direction quietly gathered force. Survival for Tudor women never came from loud victories or open confrontation. It grew slowly, shaped through years of careful behavior, quiet choices, and disciplined silence. While men claimed authority through titles, land, and war, women learned to navigate a world that rarely acknowledged their intelligence or their burden. They operated in narrow spaces, where a single misstep could cost them reputation, safety, or even their lives. Yet within those limits, they crafted methods of endurance that allowed them to influence outcomes without ever appearing to lead them. They understood early that force was not available to them. A woman who openly defied a man risked losing everything, regardless of whether she was queen or servant. The court watched their movements closely, waiting for signs of instability. Because of this, they shaped their strength into forms that drew little attention: controlled gestures, measured speech, and steady observation. Their resilience did not announce itself. It accumulated in silence, layer by layer. Much of this survival depended on understanding how others behaved. Women in the Tudor court observed the ambitions of men, the shifting loyalties of courtiers, and the unspoken tensions between families. They knew that influence rarely appeared in formal decisions. It showed itself in habits, alliances, and emotional ties. To move safely, they had to predict reactions before they happened. This required patience, attention, and an ability to read people with precision. Secrets played a central role in their existence. A woman who kept her thoughts hidden gained a kind of power unavailable to those who spoke too freely. She shared only what served her, withholding the rest. This practice created a distance around her, a barrier that protected her from manipulation. Those who tried to provoke her found little to work with. The less others knew, the safer she remained. In this quiet withholding, she created room to maneuver, room to breathe, even in households far from court. The pattern held. Wives, mothers, and daughters learned to maintain their roles while shaping decisions indirectly. A comment offered at the right moment could influence the direction of a family. A gesture of disapproval could halt an argument. A calm refusal could shift priorities. They used subtlety not because they were weak, but because confrontation harmed them more than it harmed anyone else. The structure of the world pushed them into silence, and they turned that silence into a form of navigation. Still, the burden of restraint weighed heavily. Women carried fears they could never speak of, doubts they could never voice, and frustrations that remained locked behind composed expressions. A man might indulge in anger openly. A woman could not. She learned to swallow it, letting it dissolve slowly until it hardened into a quiet determination. This internal labor defined her more than any public action. It shaped her posture, her voice, and her choices in ways few recognized. Ambition did not disappear simply because the world discouraged it. Women redirected it inward, transforming it into persistence. Some pursued security for their children. Others sought stability for their households. A few aimed for influence, positioning themselves near those who shaped policy or controlled wealth. Avon queens, surrounded by ceremony, operated inside these same constraints. They feared rumors more than armies, for rumors could dismantle their authority before they had a chance to defend it. Those who survived longest mastered a blend of caution and clarity. They learned when to speak and when to remain silent, when to stand firm and when to withdraw. They cultivated allies carefully, choosing people who understood their goals without requiring explanations. They observed more than they acted, recognizing that knowledge often mattered more than display. Time worked in their favor when they let others exhaust themselves through conflicts they never entered. Their victories were rarely celebrated. No songs marked their endurance. No records praised their judgment. Yet their impact shaped the lives around them. A calm reaction at the right moment preserved stability in a household. A concealed disappointment prevented unnecessary conflict. A withheld opinion protected a child from danger. These contributions did not appear in official histories, but they formed the quiet structure beneath the lives of men who believed they ruled alone, even when danger closed in. When rumors spread, when alliances shifted, when losses seemed inevitable, women adapted. They reorganized their priorities, protected what they could, and moved in ways that minimized harm. Some found temporary security in marriages. Others relied on networks of relatives or loyal servants. A few used religious devotion as a shield. Their methods varied, but their goal remained constant: survival in a world that treated them as expendable. They were not passive. They were not silent by nature. They were shaped by necessity, forced to cultivate a form of intelligence that required no acknowledgement to exist. Their restraint, their observation, and their ability to outlast louder and more reckless rivals defined their strength. They fought without weapons, defended themselves without armor, and influenced outcomes without stepping into official positions of power. In the end, the measure of their success was simple: the woman who endured longest, who protected her household, who preserved her dignity, and who kept her secrets intact. She survived. Her story might remain hidden, overshadowed by the loud, violent histories of men, but her survival was its own quiet triumph. She navigated a world that doubted her capability, resisted her autonomy, and constrained her voice. Yet she remained standing. Tudor women did not require open conflict to fight. They required clarity, to discipline, and a sense of timing that many never recognized. They lived in a world designed to overlook them. Yet they carved out paths through it with a steadiness that left lasting marks. Their silence was not emptiness. It was calculation. Their endurance was not submission. It was strategy. And the secrets they carried were not signs of weakness. They were proof of how sharply they understood the world around them. Thank you for staying with this story until its final breath. May your night be quiet, your thoughts gentle, and your rest undisturbed. Good night.